It is the nightmare scenario. A runaway tractor trailer. A stalled school bus full of unsuspecting kids. A brutal collision. Fortunately, this is only a test, a seatbelt crash test. Notice that crash test dummies in seatbelts stay in the bus. An unbelted dummy is violently ejected. Indeed, it is what happens far too often in real life. And it happened here in 2008 in rural Alberta, when a gravel truck crashed into a school bus in the fog.
That morning was very, very foggy. You couldn't see the power poles.
Donna Noble's daughter Jenny was 17, in her final year of high school, looking forward to her prom, then college.
So I put her on the bus that morning, and I was working out of the fire hall then, and I got to the fire hall, and the fire chief said, "There's been a school bus accident." And I looked at him and I said, "It's Jenny's bus." And he said, "We don't know that." And I said, "I do."
And Donna was right. It was her daughter's bus. Jenny was ejected from the rear seat and hurled onto the pavement by the collision, with no seatbelt to keep her inside.
I would have thought that it would have become standard on any motor vehicle on a road. Plain and simple.
Every day in Canada, 40,000 school buses transport about 2 million kids to school.
Good morning. Good morning.
On most of them, as on this ride recently to Holy Trinity Elementary School in Toronto, there are no seatbelts. And these kids wonder why.
What do you think? Should there be seatbelts on school buses or not?
There should be seatbelts.
Yeah? And why should there be seatbelts, do you think?
Because some people can fall, like over here.
If there's an accident, then we could get really hurt. Maybe the bus flips over and go onto the roof, but seatbelts would kind of stop that problem.
They say that school buses are one of the safest forms of transportation. But even with a low accident rate, over the past 2 decades in Canada, there have been tens of thousands of school bus collisions, causing thousands of injuries and a number of deaths, many of which could have been prevented.
If you get into an accident, you would stay in your spot because a seatbelt makes you safe.
Actually, a minute ago, I almost fell off the seat. That just influenced my decision even more.
The question on every Canadian parent's mind: why aren't there seatbelts on Canada's school buses? The answer to that has to come from Transport Canada, the federal vehicle safety regulator. For 40 years, they've been telling us to buckle up our kids in cars. But school buses? Apparently that's a different story. To this day, Transport Canada insists seatbelts on school buses aren't necessary, that they won't make kids safer, that they might make accidents even worse. Now, you might well ask, how is that possible? It happened like this, and it goes back to a Transport Canada crash test in 1984. It was a major production. They even did a movie of it with the National Film Board.
The final checks. Cameras loaded, dummies in position.
Buses with dummies were driven head-on into a wall, accompanied by ominous music. According to Transport Canada, a seating system called compartmentalization is used in school buses to keep children safe without seatbelts in an accident.
The high-back padded seats absorb the energy of the impact.
And Transport Canada claims that lap seatbelts could actually injure kids by creating a whiplash effect in a head-on collision.
Enough to be fatal or result in serious injury.
It became what American officials called the most widely cited crash test of its time, trumpeted by bus manufacturers and school boards across North America. The message simple and reassuring. Without seatbelts, school buses remain the safest form of transportation. And that anti-seatbelt mantra has been echoed for years by politicians, premiers, bureaucrats.
I am not in favor of seatbelts in school buses with the information I have today.
It's in fact safer for children not to have safety belts.
The seat in which he finds himself is designed so that he has protection.
And groups like the Canada Safety Council have gone along with that too. According to the Safety Watchdog's website, there is no scientific evidence that seatbelts save lives on school buses.
The design of school buses makes them exactly in that sphere where seatbelts are not helpful and in some cases can actively be harmful.
Lewis Smith is the Safety Council's manager of national projects.
The shock-absorbent material absorbs most of the blow and the injuries are kept to a minimum.
Yeah, and that's based upon what evidence?
That's based upon Transport Canada.
You're talking about Transport Canada's 1984 test and others.
Yes.
And that 1984 study is a big reason why tens of millions of kids all across North America ride beltless to school each day. But a fifth estate investigation has uncovered serious problems with Transport Canada's research and found new details about what the government has known about school buses and seatbelts and safety, but has kept secret from Canadians. Since that 1984 study, there have been at least 24 school bus deaths across Canada, more than 100 in the US, and school bus injuries in both countries totaling more than 140,000. From Dunrobin, Ontario in 1999 to Regina in 2006 to Cape Breton in 2016. And the horrific physics of those crashes are visible here. Real-life school bus surveillance footage from Ohio in 2003 and Missouri in 2014. Watching this, it seems counterintuitive, but Transport Canada claims not only would seatbelts not protect children, they might lead to even more injuries.
It's frustrating.
Just don't try telling that to someone who's lived through a crash like one of those.
I think it's common sense that seatbelts save lives.
It was just over a decade ago, outside Beaumont, Texas. Like many school districts, they thought here that Transport Canada's study was all you needed to know about surviving school bus crashes. That would change.
That is one happy-looking group.
Oh yeah, we had a great time. We were crazy and fun, and we were good at soccer too, yeah.
Then came the spring of 2006. 16-year-old Sarah Beach and her high school soccer teammates were headed to a playoff game in Houston when their bus lost control on a rain-slicked highway.
And then the next thing I knew, I was laying on the side of the road. It was just pure shock, like a war had gone on, you know, people walking around covered in blood and just chaos.
Sarah and 19 others were injured. She had a serious head injury, and her body was scraped to the bone by the highway, the scars a constant reminder of what happened.
I think it's very clear because of how the bus fell on its side, how we were toppled on top of each other, how I was dragged across the asphalt, that if we had been strapped into our seats, it would be a completely different story.
It might be different too for Sarah's best friend Ashley Brown, who died that day, and her teammate Allison Foreman, who was badly hurt.
Everybody's thrown out of the bus because there's no seatbelt.
Ashley and Allison's fathers are Steve Foreman and Brad Brown.
No one left that bus without some injury or death. My daughter died in that crash. She was ejected from her seat and was killed instantly.
Our daughters were thrown out of the bus, ejected from their seats because there were no seatbelts, and that sort of propelled us into learning all about student transportation and bus transportation.
The two dads would spend the next decade battling to get seatbelts into buses. And it wasn't long before they discovered something unexpected, an informal alliance of bus companies and school boards, groups strongly opposed to seatbelts.
We became disgusted, frankly, with the school bus industry. When you get into this, you see that the government agencies pick and choose what they want to listen to, what statistics they want to pull from. And frankly, we finally got to the point where it's follow the money.
Surprisingly, as far back as 40 years ago, Transport Canada actually planned to require seatbelts in Canadian school buses. But when the school bus industry heard that, they lobbied against it, hard, with what were called adverse representations to Transport Canada. Their main complaint, the cost-benefit ratio. In other words, would the injuries and deaths prevented be worth the price? The government promptly backed down. There would be no seatbelts on school buses in Canada, after all. Steve and Brad say the stated reasons for no school bus seatbelts were an affront to the facts.
Children can't unbuckle. Children can't buckle and unbuckle. Children will use lap belts as weapons. All sorts of arguments, and if I've heard it 1,000 times, they will tell you that a school bus is like an egg crate, with the children as eggs nestled in their seats and all of this padding on the seat in front of them. And my argument was always, and what happens when you turn the egg crate over? Or what happens if you shake an egg crate without a top and all the eggs go flying out, right?
Number one on Brad and Steve's list, that Transport Canada crash test of 1984.
We're tired of the misinformation.
It turns out the Canadians didn't test the most dangerous crashes, side impacts and rollovers. They didn't test three-point seatbelts, proven to prevent injuries in cars. And that film left out some stunning information. Transport Canada had already learned that in a previous study, of 7 children who died in school bus crashes, 6 would have survived if they'd worn a seatbelt. But there's not a word in the crash test promotional film about that.
So they were rigged, you believe?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The facts don't lie. If you allow the facts to speak for themselves, then the conclusion is what every parent knows. Seatbelt saves lives.
If Transport Canada is on the front lines of the campaign against school bus seatbelts, this product evaluation center in Indiana is ground zero in the battle for them.
This is where we keep our anthropomorphic test devices, better known as crash dummies.
Oh my.
So this is it. This is the lab.
This is eerie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever expect one of them to say something to you when you come in here? Like,
ouch.
Yeah. James Johnson is an executive with IMI, the company which runs this, one of the largest crash test sites in the world. For years here, they've manufactured three-point seatbelts for school buses and tested them here in dangerous situations. Repeatedly, crash test dummies in seatbelts stay in place. The unbelted go flying.
Compartmentalization does the best it can, it's just not good enough.
So IMI designed a school bus seating system, combining three-point lap and shoulder belts with the high-backed padded seats called compartmentalization.
Well, compartmentalization does nothing for you in side impacts or rollovers. So those are the type of accidents, unfortunately, where tragedy strikes and you have children injured and killed. And that's where a lap and shoulder belt will make a big difference, Bob.
That message is now becoming a reality in places like Austin, Texas.
Well, it's obvious we've come to the right place. This is the bus depot of the Austin, Texas Independent School District.
To me, it's about what additional safety feature you are giving to the students and to the parents.
Chris Hafizizadeh oversees a fleet of 500 buses carrying 23,000 students a day, all belted in.
So as we stand here now, all new buses have the three-point belt.
Right.
Can you show me what that looks like?
Sure.
Being Canadian, I
Sure.
don't think I've ever seen a school bus with seat belts of any kind.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, welcome to Austin. We have them here. So this is our bus that is 4 years old.
Yep.
And I want to show you what we got on here.
And how much do all those new seat belts cost? The consensus we've found is that it works out to about $25 per year per child.
It does add about $7,000 to $10,000 to the cost of a bus when you purchase one. Here's my part on that. At what point you're gonna put value of money in the same equation as safety of a child?
When we come back, what else Transport Canada has known about seatbelts in school buses that it's not telling us? I've looked for these results on the website, and are they there? I haven't been able to find them.
I don't believe so. No, they're not there.
Was this ever released publicly?
Not that I'm aware of.
It is before sunrise, and across the continent, school bus fleets are starting their day. Hundreds of thousands of buses carrying tens of millions of students from kindergarten to high school. Driver Tom Lewin is about to hit the road for his morning run in Lake Travis, Texas.
I drive about 85 miles every day.
Increasingly, U.S. school districts like this one have been installing three-point lap and shoulder belts in their new school buses.
Good morning, Leland. You look nice today.
And if you think young school bus passengers can't or won't put their seatbelts on and keep them on, think again. Meet third graders Zoe and Lainey.
Did your parents tell you to do that, or your teachers? Who tells you to put in it?
The bus driver tells us.
What would happen if you didn't wear your seatbelts, guys?
We could get hurt. We could get hurt. Because we could flip over, like, because of a big rock, and we can fall and break our necks.
And it seems universal. In Canada, we heard the same thing. Kids who don't have seatbelts want them.
It's safer if you put on seatbelts for the younger kids and for us too.
Put seatbelts on school buses.
So you would like seatbelts on school buses? Yeah.
Yet here in Etobicoke, Ontario, and across the country, officially, Transport Canada insists they're not needed.
I always wanted to know why there's no seatbelts on school buses.
That question has been asked by parents and children for decades, since the now infamous Transport Canada study that said seatbelts could be dangerous. And in Rimbey, Alberta, in 2008, an accident so horrifying it put seatbelts under scrutiny again. 3 local teenagers were ejected from their school bus after it was hit by a gravel truck. Sitting in the last row, 17-year-old Jenny Noble was thrown from the bus and killed. Her mother Donna drives by the crash site almost every day.
My first words to the doctor were, "Did she suffer?" And they said, no, she died instantly.
Then 14, Keenan Clark was ejected from the seat in front of Jenny.
The pylon, I guess, there is kind of where I was sitting. They have it flagged there.
He had head trauma, broken ribs, fractured vertebrae, and more.
If seatbelts would have been on the bus, Jenny probably would have stayed on the bus. Everything that happened to me happened after I fell out of the bus. So I think if there had been a seatbelt holding me in the bus, that'd have been fabulous.
In Alberta, the accident triggered a provincial review into school bus safety, and there was brief hope for mandatory seatbelts. But then Transport Canada's position was considered that seatbelts may put students at greater risk of injury. And once again, the call for seatbelts fell silent. Since that accident a decade ago, school bus injuries in Canada have kept climbing. And Transport Canada's isolation in its anti-seatbelt stance has kept increasing too. But south of the border, the major safety organizations, the National Transportation Safety Board, the National Safety Council, the head of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, are virtually unanimous. School bus seatbelts prevent injuries and save lives. Yet if you visit Transport Canada's website today, it still insists there is no evidence that seatbelts would make kids safer.
There's been a lot of work done.
Suzanne Tilko runs Transport Canada's testing facility. in the US, the NTSB, the National Safety Council, states which account for about half of the US population, all have mandatory school bus seatbelt policies.
They have their policies with their policymakers. It's what works for them.
But isn't that the point, that it was 35 years ago, and to this day, effectively, if you look at Transport Canada's website, it's the same policy. Might not make things better, might make things worse, no scientific evidence.
Again, coming from the point of view of a researcher, I can tell you that because I don't write the policy and I'm not part of that.
If that sounds like a lukewarm endorsement of the no seatbelts policy, there might be a reason. 8 years ago, Suzanne Tilko herself conducted another study for Transport Canada. She concluded the existing seat padding on school buses is not effective inside impacts and does not do enough to reduce or eliminate the serious injuries. In other words, it's the opposite of what they've long insisted. But that study was kept quiet until we asked for it.
In 2010, you were the lead on a study for Transport Canada. What was the conclusion?
Well, the conclusion was with the seatbelts, that the seatbelts do prevent ejection.
Which showed that compartmentalization was not adequate.
In inside impact and in rollovers, yes.
I've looked for these results on the website, and are they there? I haven't been able to find them.
I don't believe so. No, they're not there.
Was this ever released publicly?
Not that I'm aware of.
This is Transport Canada.
Even Lewis Smith of the Canada Safety Council admits he had no idea such a report exists.
As a safety advocate, I firmly believe that anything that advances the cause of safety should be made public.
Well, if that 2010 report by Transport Canada came to the conclusion that compartmentalization alone wasn't adequate, and those were the words, it's troubling.
It's very concerning. I would absolutely like to see the evidence behind it, and that could very well change our position.
And then the head of Transport Canada's test facility said something no one there has ever publicly admitted before.
Bringing in the seatbelts is a good first step.
You are saying that, in your eyes, seatbelts in school buses should be done, should be undertaken?
It's a good first step.
You say it's a good first step. Is not a good first step better than nothing? Why doesn't that qualify as reason to put them mandatorily in school buses?
Well, again, I can't speak to that. You would have to ask people who decide those policies, because I can't answer that. I can't answer that.
It's the question at the heart of this passionate fight in Canada, especially for people like Donna Noble, who know too well what's at stake.
Is it cost? I don't know. But what's the cost of a life? What's a life worth?
For 34 years and counting, Transport Canada has vehemently rejected seatbelts on school buses. The admission in our on-camera interview is a shocking reversal, and it raises the question, why did all those injuries and deaths that seatbelts might have prevented, like Jenny Noble's, have to happen?
Love you, Jenny. Miss you, kiddo. Miss ya.
Last month, in Innisfil, Ontario, there was another school bus crash. 2 students suffered broken bones. Another was airlifted to hospital with a neck injury. There were, of course, no seatbelts on the bus.